Let us pray. Lord of all, this moment is not a moment that any of us would have chosen. But you have chosen us for this moment. Bless those who have been given great responsibility with great compassion for all people who will be affected by their decisions. With great wisdom to see beyond what is merely in the short term, with great courage to do what is right even when it is difficult, and with the gift of grace, love, and justice, which carries us all the way when we put our faith and trust in you. We pray your blessing upon each of us as we seek to do your will this day, that our works may be pleasing in your sight. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session.
No, I don't mix it.
This before. You want me to do? Minutes of the meeting held on Friday, March 27, 2020 to be deferred. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that those minutes be taken as read.
To be deferred.
Sorry, I beg to move that those minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honour the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General.
Her Excellency the Governor General, to the Honourable the House of Assembly. Her Excellency the Governor General has the honour to inform the Honourable the House of Assembly of the following. Section 60, subsection 1 of the Constitution provides that each session of Parliament shall be held at such place and commence at such time as the Governor General may appoint. Her Excellency further has the honour to inform the Honourable the House of Assembly that by proclamation dated 27th day of March 2020, she has appointed Worthing Corporate Centre, Worthing, Christchurch, as the place at which the session of Parliament commenced on the 24th day of February 2020, and the place at which the session shall continue to be held at 10:00 hours in the morning as the time at which the said session shall commence. Signed, Governor General, Government House, Barbados, 20th March 2020. A letter from Honourable Santia Bradshaw MP. A second message from the Governor General. Her Excellency the Governor General to the Honourable the House of Assembly. Her Excellency the Governor General has the honor to inform the Honourable the House of Assembly of the following. Section 28, subsection 1 of the Emergency Management Act, Cap 160A, states that where the Governor General is satisfied that an emergency has arisen as a result of a person or an animal having a communicable disease or a notifiable disease, the Governor General may, by proclamation, on the advice of the Prime Minister, after the Prime Minister has consulted or has been advised by the Chief Medical Officer, declare that a public health emergency exists. Her Excellency further has the honor to inform the Honourable the House of Assembly that in accordance with Section 20A, subsection 3 of the said Cap 160A, she has declared a public health emergency. Signed, Governor General, Government House, Barbados, 28th of March, 2020.
To announcements, by Your Honor.
A letter from the Honourable Santiago Bradshaw MP, Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, and Leader of Government Business. March 30th, 2020. His Honour the Speaker, the Honourable House of Assembly, Parliament Buildings, Trafalgar Street, Bridgetown. Your Honour, the House now stands adjourned until 17th April 2020 at 10 o'clock a.m. Pursuant to Standing Order number 6.9 of the Standing Orders of the Honourable the House of Assembly, I hereby submit that the public interest requires that the House should meet on an earlier day than that to which the House stands adjourned in order to receive communication from Her Excellency the Governor General in accordance with Section 28, subsection C3 of the Emergency Management Amendment Act 2027, that Her Excellency has made a proclamation of a public health emergency pursuant to Section 20A, subsection 1 of the said Act. Should you be satisfied that the public interest so requires, the government requests that the House should be summoned to meet on Wednesday, April 1st, 2020 at 11 o'clock a.m. Government proposes that the business of the House should be those mentioned above. Yours faithfully, Santiago J. O. Bradshaw, MP, Minister and Leader of Government Business. I believe that it's important for clarity to read Standing Order 6.9. And I read, if during an adjournment of the House it is represented to the Speaker by a minister that the public interest requires that the House should meet on an earlier day than that to which the House stands adjourned, the Speaker, if he is satisfied that the public interest does so require, may give notice accordingly, and the House shall meet at the time stated in such notice. The business set down for that day shall be appointed by the government, and notice thereof shall be circulated not later than the time of the meeting. I hereby declare that I am satisfied that this meeting is in the public interest.
Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, private members' business, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills. First reading.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Planning and Development Amendment Bill 2020 in the name of the Honourable. Okay.
Second, please.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a first time All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day. Suspension.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 1, sir. In the name of the Honourable Acting Leader of the House, to move that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee to consider the grant of sums of money for the service of this item.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central be appointed Chair.
The question is that the honorable member for St. Michael West Central be appointed chairman of committee of the standing committee. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The honorable member is hereby appointed as chairman.
And you go for
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that Your Honour do leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee.
The question is that the speaker do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into standing finance committee. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is in committee.
in the name of the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, to move the passing of a resolution to grant the sum of $28,500,000 from the Consolidated Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2020 to 2021 as shown in the supplementary estimates number 1, 2020 to 2021, which form the schedule to the resolution. Head 13, Prime Minister's Office, in the amount of $10 million.
The Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you, Chair. It is unusual, sir, for the House certainly to meet on the first day of any financial year to introduce supplementaries. And I want to repeat in the context of what the Speaker had issued earlier with respect to the urgency in terms of public importance, that we are meeting here on the 1st of April. It is not an April Fool's joke by any stretch of the imagination, sir. And we are doing so because of the very serious impact with respect to COVID-19, not just globally, but certainly on the Barbados economy. And the Chamber is here this morning, sir, to bring to reality the start of a number of relief programs with respect to cash transfers to certainly vulnerable households across the country in Barbados. And therefore, we are here this morning, Chair, basically to do that in a very serious way. Now, 2 Fridays ago, the Prime Minister, in wrapping up the second reading of the appropriation bill, announced that there will be a household survival program, and therefore the supplementary request being asked for the Prime Minister's office is to capitalize, sir, that specific program to be able to respond in a very urgent way, sir, with respect to the serious and broad economic fallout that COVID-19 certainly has posed to Barbados. I take this opportunity again, sir, to reinforce to the public that it is critically important that we first seek to contain the spread of the virus in Barbados, such that the broader economic fallout can be as minimal as possible. But for as long as there is economic fallout, sir, these programs, or this program forms a part of what the government is seeking to respond to households and individuals in the first instance, to ensure that for the foreseeable future, that persons who have lost their jobs, persons for whom their livelihoods pretty much, whether as vendors, some self-employed persons, and I want to take this opportunity again to impress upon all Barbadians, all walks of life, that times like these demonstrate why it is important for us to be capable of ensuring that we are all subscribed fully with respect to the National Insurance Scheme. Because whilst there is no specific unemployment benefit for self-employed persons, the government is still in a position to make policy decisions, which we will announce a little later, with respect to those self-employed persons who have paid their dues with respect to the NIS. But it is critically important at this point, sir, that we allow ordinary Barbadians and their households who are truly vulnerable at this time in an environment that is particularly uncertain, that these $10 million here under the Household Survival Program will, for the most part, go to the most vulnerable families across this land to provide grants of $600 per month to allow families to be capable of going to the supermarket, the mini mart, the village shops, sir, to be able to procure basic items in order for their families to be capable of surviving. We shall monitor the situation, sir, to determine whether we need to provide more monies as available. But we are very conscious that at this point in time, we have to deal with this frontally, allow the administration of government easily to move forward. One of the very important matters that we will want to say at this time is that under this program, even though it's a new program, and there's a supplementary as well for the Welfare Department under People Empowerment, that it is important at this time that once persons have bank accounts, sir, that they provide those accounts certainly with respect to these at this time, so that it makes it easier for the government to disburse the funds rather than having to print checks, mail them out, and then you have to end up going to a supermarket or, a bank or wherever, sir, to get it cash before you can access the funds. So I want to appeal to Barbadians that as we go through this process, that it's critically important that you provide your bank account information such that we can disperse as easily as possible, which then allows the government obviously to help also contribute to containing the spread of the virus. And so these sums of monies in this program, in a sense, sir, will be complemented by the Adopt a Family program. The Adopt a Family program, which a lot of persons have indicated that they want, private interests have indicated they want to support, and therefore we are very grateful for both private individuals as well as corporate citizens for help for coming to the country's rescue, and to allow us then to allow the most vulnerable families in this country to be able to see, hold their heads above water in this very trying time. And we are mindful that this is just a start. We very much hope that persons listen to the public health officials so that we can contain the spread of COVID-19 and therefore minimize the impact with respect to the economic fallout as far as the economy is concerned. So, sir, with those few words, I beg to move that head 13 in the amount of $10 million stand part.
Beg to second that, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly to say, and hopefully very clearly, that on this side we support the provision of funding to help families in Barbados whose vulnerability is increased by the present threatening circumstances of infectious disease. So let me make that abundantly clear, because there are heirs, which not necessarily in this place, but there are heirs in this land who hear not very clearly and hear other ways than that which is said. So to make it abundantly clear that I support the provision of this funding for this cause, I simply find that it's my duty to ask why the office of the Prime Minister, and I would have wished that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central would have made it clear to us as to why the office of the Prime Minister. Certainly there are other ministerial portfolios more directly responsible for this type of oversight of people's interests in Barbados. I have no doubt that the office of the Prime Minister is very taxed at this time, especially when we're facing a national crisis of the proportions that confronts us. I would further wish, if you are going to say to me or to Barbados that it is the office of the Prime Minister that manages the disbursement of these funds, that you would have made some indication as to what are the institutional mechanisms specifically within that ministry that would treat to the program, and how the program in fact would be implemented and pursued. I happen to know that there are those in Barbados who are very much ready and properly positioned to help with programs intended by the government to treat to the new needs, the new stresses, the new vulnerabilities of people at this time, whether it is helping to ensure that food-like provisions, other provisions of material substance, medication, can be had by persons, especially the elderly and those who may be in a situation of isolation, living on their own. There are people who are ready to give their hearts and hands to help with this type of work in Barbados at this difficult time. And I'm simply saying it would have been better if we could have had some indication as to the specific institutional mechanism within the office of the Prime Minister that would be responsible for the disbursement of these funds. We need to know as well how will identification of those families considered to be most exposed, most vulnerable, most threatened in this way at this time, how would that determination be made? Again, there are institutions in Barbados which are normally on the front line on treating to people's material needs, especially from a charitable perspective, who know who know in fairly intimate terms what exists out there in terms of what families and where are suffering from serious levels of poverty, which may in fact be enhanced by the now situation. So I'm saying, asking essentially, why the office of the Prime Minister at a time when it is seriously taxed, and what would be the specific institutional mechanisms within the office of the Prime Minister that would be used to spearhead this program? How would families that are intended to be the beneficiaries be identified? And I am sure that there is a proper accounting framework, and perhaps some mention could have been made as to how, after disbursement of this, proper accounting could be reflected in a transparent fashion. Not trying to be difficult, not trying to imply or attribute any other than noble motives to the program or those behind its authorship, or indeed, especially so, the office of the Prime Minister. Simply believe that it is my duty on this side to raise these issues and ask these questions. I know that the Ministry of People's Empowerment, Elderly Affairs is particularly front-lined to help with this. I anticipate that part of this funding will be allocated to them. If I may just simply make reference to it and stay within the rules, I see in the resolution that there's also 10 million to be allocated to that ministry. I'm simply asking, why the Office of the Prime Minister? Why not simply the Ministry of People's Empowerment that deals with social welfare and social transformation? What are the mechanisms to be used institutionally, specifically to spearhead the program? How will families be identified? And what are the accounting mechanisms in place for the funding?
Honourable Christchurch Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just perhaps give a little brief background to answer some of the questions for the honourable member. The reality is that since we came to government, sir, the Prime Minister has been working certainly across a number of the critical ministries to ensure that we have a whole of government response with respect to how we respond to families. And therefore, in that context, the Ministry of People Empowerment, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, sir, because families don't just access individual services in a way that we may associate with respect to welfare or the Ministry of People Empowerment as one may view. And therefore, we have embarked on a process that is seeking to respond to the entire package of needs that will be required to support families. Now, incidentally, and just I don't know if the Prime Minister, I don't recall the Prime Minister addressing this in her speech 2 Fridays ago, but our COVID-19 czar, sir, Mr. Carter, was already identified as the person who will lead the social policy coordination for government prior to COVID-19 becoming a reality. Now, his recruitment, if you like, sir, as he was stationed at DFID, was fast-tracked with respect to the onset of COVID-19 to specifically respond in this area, given the work that had already started across the ministries in terms of being able to help families. Now, let me be clear, sir. The Welfare Department deals specifically with those persons for whom, sir, on a normal basis may have some challenges facing them of various types. What we are speaking about here with respect to the impact of COVID-19 goes way beyond the traditional welfare approach, if you like, in terms of what the mandate of people empowerment happens to be. Because right now, as we stand here, as we are here in this country, the Welfare Department, and the Ministry of People Empowerment, they still have their core work to do in supporting the clients that they already support. And as I indicated, there's obviously a second supplementary to deal with that. Now, the coordination of the other pieces of work has started, but there are a whole set of other families now, sir, outside of what one may regard as traditional welfare clients that are now truly vulnerable because of the very sudden and sharp fallout with respect to COVID-19. And therefore, we are taking this opportunity to spearhead, in a sense, sir, augment that coordinated approach with respect to how we're going to pull this together. The Prime Minister is very, very clear about what is required to be done to support all families right now in the country. And therefore, this particular program is intended to be a temporary program just to deal specifically with COVID-19 over and above those families that would regularly engage the suite of social services in the country. So the government is seeking to move to in an environment where we can support families in total, and this, in a sense, will give, I think, credence to the work that had already started with respect to being able to focus on that. And so the social response in this instance obviously is accelerated because there's a broader economic impact that now draws a lot more families into the debt than they would ordinarily deal with welfare. Welfare has its challenges, which the Honourable Member for St. Thomas would have indicated during her presentation in the Appropriations Bill just a couple of weeks ago. And therefore, we want to bring the full power of government being coordinated from the Prime Minister's office in such that we can get, one, support the work that's already being done, not just within the Ministry of People Empowerment, but across the other aspects with respect to government in terms of being able to do that. Of course, sir, all of the accounting that the Honourable Member is referencing, the systems are already in place with respect to being capable of delivery. We will just augment that. The household mitigation unit, sir, for example, that was established at the beginning of the program, sir, will support in this effort and support, again, the work that the Welfare Department is doing. As you know, sir, we had to cancel all of the regathering events, and that committee too, sir, will be brought on board with respect to help deal with this, because as you can expect, sir, the burden that you cannot reasonably expect to add to the burden of the Welfare Department at this particular time, given the demands that already exist. However, these units will support their work, sir, in order to be capable of ensuring that we can respond to people in as quickly, in a shorter time as possible. And so the reality is that there's a lot of other work now to be done with respect to those persons who will suffer or would be suffering from the economic fallout, and therefore we need to be capable of responding in a very timely manner. And with those few words, I beg to move that Head 13 stand part.
Beg a second. The question is that Head 13 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment in the amount of $8,500,000.
The honourable member for Christchurch East Central.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The sums of money being requested here, sir, is to provide for the government procurement department to do a couple of things, sir. Very, very, very critical things. Because as you would appreciate, sir, the ability to keep Barbadians safe, sir, and well-fed and sheltered, sir, is critical at this stage. And we are doing a couple of things within the context of this supplementary, sir, to allow the government to be, through the government procurement department, sir, to acquire stores of foodstuff to be capable of delivery as required, sir, certainly for the next few months. Now, we are also very conscious, sir, that we are approaching the hurricane season. And therefore, as we hope that this is a very short and sharp disruption with respect to the impact of COVID-19 on the global logistics supply, we are ensuring that the government, through the government procurement department, will be capable of ensuring that there's a stock of food on island, separate and distinct from what is in the normal distribution network for persons, so that if there is to be any specific disruption, sir, which because of, as you would have noticed, the United States extended their lockdown until the end of the month, that will have obviously a knock-on effect with respect to supplies, and therefore, having already started the work, we've come here today, sir, to vote this money and to be capable of for the government procurement department to be capable of getting critical stores of food, basic items, sir, that outside of the traditional system. In addition to that, sir, some of the monies here with respect to the acquisition of personal protection equipment, as one would expect in this environment, that in order for certainly the healthcare workers to operate. We have already ramped up our orders. As you know, many companies around the world are experiencing shortages with respect to production, given the various lockdowns that are taking place across the world. And therefore, having started to acquire some, we want to ensure that we can get some more as quickly as possible so that we have the capacity not just to deal with it in Barbados, but in the event that some of our neighbors may need assistance, sir, that we may be in a position also to help as required as well. So these sums of monies are to do, as I said, sir, do two very critical things. And as I said, we are mindful of the fact that the hurricane season is also approaching, and therefore we want to put the country in a position where we are confident that we can manage certainly the access of food. I know that the Ministry of Agriculture is ramping up its local domestic production capacity, but we want to make sure that on the other end, that the government has stock of food stores available to be able to augment what is already in existence with respect to the private sector. And secondly, with respect to the acquisition of personal protection equipment in order to ensure that the healthcare workers and those persons who may be in caring for persons who may be afflicted with COVID-19, that we can have enough protective equipment to service those specific needs. And so, sir, I beg to move that head 34 in the amount of $8.5 million stand part.
Second that, sir.
Just simply, again, Mr. Chairman, to ask a couple of questions. The amount requested is purported to refer to relate to the acquisition of food stores, personal protection equipment for COVID-19. Am I to take it that there will be additional, sorry, in relation to the hurricane season as well? I interpreted that to mean food stores in preparation for the hurricane season, and also in relation to the now circumstance, and personal protection equipment relative to COVID-19. My query simply really has to do with whether or not there will be other funding requested for other supplies in the event that there is an impact in the hurricane season, other supplies other than food.
I think, remember, and not to interrupt you, but the
Please interrupt me.
Sorry, but the government during the estimates before the close of the financial year would have also made reference to a vote for the health, for the Ministry of Health, which would have included a substantial amount dedicated for pharmaceuticals and other stuff.
In the case of an impact in the summer, okay, well, fine. My other question would be, what portion of this would be anticipated to be local food supplies? If there is an indication, what component of this would be local, so that our people might benefit as well? Our producers, that is. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Yes, sir. The government procurement department right now will be focusing on acquiring those very basic food items that are required to sustain people. So in much the same way as over the weekend, and I want to say, and I'll leave that to the next supplementary. But the point is, sir, is the acquisition of basic food supplies to be capable of seeing the country through. And therefore, that is where the focus will be. If some of those items are obviously produced locally, then those will be acquired locally. Some may very well be from external to Barbados. We will have to see where we can get those from. But the reality is that at this stage where there are issues ahead with respect to logistics, we just want to be absolutely cautious with respect to what we acquire right now so that the country is not exposed in any significant way, given that it will take time for the domestic agriculture production obviously to come to harvest, and therefore we want to ensure that we can bridge that gap if and when there's any extended or protracted period with respect to the impact of COVID-19. And so, and of course, the PPE is self-explanatory. And so, sir, I beg to move that Head 34 stand part.
The question is that Head 34 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Head 35, Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, in the amount of $10 million.
Honourable member for Christchurch Central.
Yes, sir. This particular provision being requested is to top up the existing vote for the Welfare Department, as the Prime Minister announced that the increase in the grants of 40% with respect to the existing benefits that the welfare disburses will now be increased by 40%. Now, I want to say, sir, that in addition to this particular element, the Ministry of People Empowerment, sir, has already responded and delivered care packages to hundreds of families across this country over the course of the weekend, and over 3,000 care packages, sir, as indicated, and that, sir, it was indeed a Herculean task. But the reality is that these monies now, in a sense, sir, is to ensure that those persons who are truly vulnerable, because a lot of these grants, sir, relates to persons with disabilities. You have persons certainly with children who have various ailments, as well, sir, as with respect to being able to top up the myriad of grants that the Welfare Department gives to persons on a normal basis. And this is important even more so at this time, and it is instructive because this was something that was in the works prior to COVID-19. And it was something that would have been announced ordinarily in with respect to a budgetary matter if things had gone the normal course of action. And so these monies here is now obviously to augment that. And as I would have indicated earlier, there are a whole set of other families now that will be drawn into the net with respect to the impact of COVID-19, which the other program, as I indicated, will help to support. But welfare now has to, in a sense, now play a much more leading role with respect to responding to specifically their traditional client class, if you like, sir. And these sums of monies are being voted with respect to the Welfare Department to increase the grants to individuals by some 40% across the board. Now, this obviously will help in a lot of households across the country because, as you would appreciate, sir, the types of grants that are dispersed by welfare are not only necessarily suited to those that you may consider to be vulnerable, that they are very case-specific benefits for persons. And so it will go a long way with respect to being able to ease some of these persons certainly through this very critical time. I know, sir, that there will be some, in a sense, some overlap because some of these grants are specific to people, whereas in the other program it's specific to households which we will identify as being vulnerable. There is some overlap, but much of the grants that are normally given within the context of this is very individual specific, and we want to ensure that persons in this country, whatever their circumstance, that they're capable of getting through this time in order to ensure that the country can come out much stronger going forward. The reality is, sir, that these sums of monies being voted today in total really just represents a start in terms of how we will augment the cash transfer program to individuals and households, at the very time where there's great uncertainty with respect to one, when in a sense, how long it will take for us to contain the public health emergency, when the economy in Barbados, in terms of what we have proposed with respect to stimulus, given the curfew, and when business will start back in that context. And then 3, sir, when the lag impact that the global economy is going to have, because it will take some time before normal tourism and those activities start to come back. And so therefore it is important that in the short to medium term, that these cash transfer programs, sir, to individuals and households can be accelerated, because at the end of the day, our mission, sir, as government, when we started, we spoke about all the things that were mission critical. The reality is, as we stand here, sir, what is mission critical right now is to ensure that, one, we can preserve life in this country, which is why we are encouraging all Barbadians to follow the advice, sir, of the public health officials, because that is the primary mission. Secondly, sir, we want to make sure that all individuals and households in this country can find a way through this process, hold their heads above the water, as the Prime Minister said, and therefore these cash transfer programs, as they are, will be the start of allowing individuals and families to be able to see themselves through this particular process. And then thirdly, sir, once we are able to cover off the public health issue, as well as the cash transfer program, we can then start to focus on how we can deal with the domestic stimulus program, which there will be further action on. But right now, it is critical that we first contain the public health crisis, and then, but 2, make sure that individuals and vulnerable households can survive, sir, so that we can come out of this in the shortest possible time. And so, sir, I beg to move that Head 35 stand part.
Beg second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Again, very briefly, I obviously will not vote against a request for additional monies for the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs, the Welfare Department, because I've asked that it be given more funding even before these measures were announced. And they still need to get more when we are able so to afford, I am sure. I want also to say that I appreciate the initiative shown by the Honourable Minister, the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, who over the last weekend and prior to that made several attempts to contact me to make sure that St. Michael West was not left out entirely from the process of provision of some supplies and grocery packs. That is very much appreciated by me on behalf of the people of St. Michael West. The Honourable Minister personally called me more than once until we were able to establish that contact. And I think there was somebody individual, maybe the Permanent Secretary, somebody else on her behalf. And I want to thank her for that. It runs totally contrary to the mouthings of the Barbados Labour Party representative on the ground in St. Michael West, who says that Joseph Hadley is no longer part of the government, so he can't get anything from the government. So abandon him and come with me, because you will not be able to get. It goes totally contrary to that. I appreciate, therefore, in that particular context as well, the gesture of the minister, and I think she is the second minister. I think some time ago, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, the minister responsible for public works, did communicate with me and offer to help with one or two. Yes, that would help. But a little bit tongue in cheek. But I'm making a very serious comment. I appreciate the action of the member for St. Thomas, the honourable member for St. Thomas in this. It does not happen as a matter of course in political culture in Barbados. And I do not know that things substantially have been changed. I have only received such gesture of goodwill for the support of St. Michael West from the Minister of Public Works and now from the Honourable Member of St. Thomas. And I hear without having been provided with proof from the Honourable Member St. George South.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to let the Honourable Leader of the Opposition know that he came out of good stock, and he would have always seen the Barbados Labour Party perform in that way. And we are not here to separate and divide. We are one people. We are one people, and we care for our people, even our visitors who are among us. And so it is my duty and the duty of this government to ensure that whatever is made available for the people of Barbados, it trickles down to them, despite whatever political party or gathering or institution that the individuals may be part of. I want to say, sir, how happy I am to be able to speak to this supplementary for the People Empowerment and Elder Affairs Ministry, and to really at the outset indicate that times are hard. I'm not going to go into cantankerous and dangerous as the singer would have said, but it is really extremely hard for Barbadians at this time, and so it is for people across the entire world. And we believe that politics is about people, and once we're in a position to help to cater to their needs and to help to empower them, that we will continue to do so. And the Honourable Member who would have introduced the resolution, the supplementary, would have indicated about our program, the policies that we would have come into this government in our manifesto to ensure that we are not going to leave anybody behind. And we all know that most of our people are extremely vulnerable. They would have come through that last decade where life was so hard. There were so many taxes they had to pay. Few people paid attention to them and their needs when it came to food, clothing, education, housing, health, and I could go on and on. But my role this morning, sir, is not to lay emphasis on that, but to indicate that because the Barbados Labour Party is a caring party, and this government, under the astute leadership of our Prime Minister, is one that forever looked after the needs of people. I want to say how proud I am to be here this morning to represent all Barbadians, but on this occasion, particularly those who are impoverished, those who are differently able, and those who are ill. And despite what anybody says, we have thousands of Barbadians who have fallen through the cracks for one reason or another. And it is the duty of this government to make sure that we engage people, determine what their needs are, and wherever possible, look after them in a way that will help to improve their health and their ways of living. And so this supplementary goes towards that. I also want, Mr. Chairman, to indicate that before, I think our last survey was done in 2010. And between 2010 and 2020, we're talking a decade. And it really is important, or was important, that just over 8 months ago, this government determined that there was too much poverty. We have walked the length and breadth of this country. We have seen people who are rich, people who are middle class, people who are poor, but we have seen the most vulnerable people who do not beg, but they let you know there's nothing in the house to eat. I have never known a Barbados like this before, as young as I am. Never ever before seen such stark poverty in this country, worse than when I was growing up as a child way back in the 1950s. And so we determined we are not going to leave anybody behind. We're going to start looking at the most vulnerable families, and we start to look after the most vulnerable individuals, because everybody doesn't have a family. We've got so many elderly persons who have no one to care for them. They are the vulnerable ones. And we determined we're going to draw on police officers, post men and women or postal workers, the youth commissioners, the social workers, community officers, politicians, any and everybody who could give us information so that we can send our social workers into our various communities to indicate what the needs are and to document. And therefore, there's no point in having all the money in the Treasury and in the National Insurance Office and wherever, and people out there don't have a simple, ordinary meal to eat on a daily basis. And sir, you would have witnessed before, when we were in Parliament, any evening you look through over Parliament's walls, in Hero Square of all places, in the past administration, you would have seen hundreds of people coming to receive a meal, to receive dinner at night. And there were other areas where people were fed. And so we believe if the taxpayers' money is coming in, then it must not only trickle down to those who are business people, or people will say the politicians or the government employees, but it must trickle down to those who are the most vulnerable. And therefore, we've been working assiduously over the last year and a half, going 2 years now, to ensure that we target those who are at the bottom of the ladder, to give them a hand from dependency to bring them to a level of independence so that they can go out and fend for their families. There are thousands of people, sir, who want to work, but because of the economic situation in the past that we have inherited, many of them still are on the breadline. And you would have known, sir, some persons were retrenched. But when you get your NIS, and that runs out, and you have children that fathers are not giving anything, or you have children, another family that mothers are not giving anything, then the families fall through the cracks. We have too many young children on the world who are hungry. And now that we are in this crisis with COVID-19, our children are at home. The school meals made a difference in their lives when they were at school. And we still offer milk at break time. But now they are at home. If the families are already poor and have little or nothing to give them to eat, then, sir, you would appreciate that at lunchtime there's nothing. And many of them are living in more so the urban Barbados, where they can't even get a golden apple or dunks or plums or something, as we would have done in the villages where we live in rural Barbados. And so we have got to look after human beings. And we know that the Bible tells us we are walking about and saying we love God whom we cannot see. How can we hate our brothers whom we can see? God, this will be a hatred activity if we do not look to empower those who are falling through the cracks. And so these funds are to make sure that those who are most vulnerable will be able to get meals. The welfare department offers grants. They offer food. We don't call them food stamps. We call them vouchers. We pay light bill, water bill. We make sure that house rent is paid because everybody can't afford it. We do the reconnections for the water and the light. We make sure that we reach out and charge. We cannot do it for everybody, but most of those persons, I would say 90% of those persons who appear before the welfare department are the ones who will be able to benefit because they can fulfill that there is a need. And when the officers go out and do their various investigations, they're able then to come to make the recommendations. And therefore, when you're talking over 2,000 vulnerable families identified, and there are still more, our social workers, all 36 of them, I believe, are still out in the field doing their investigations to be able to report back in the Hickeys over in St. Lucie, or over in St. Philip, or over in St. Michael, or wherever the people are, we are going to reach them to make sure that they are going to be pulled into the loop to be able to receive. There are more than 500 families who are different, with families with persons who are differently able. We are making sure that they are looked after. We're making sure that over 2,000 elderly who are out there relying on the National Assistance Board to look after their needs, and then there are many others who have never been identified. We're asking, or we're trying, I should say, to be able to look after their needs, to make sure at least one basic meal is there per day, to make sure that, and asking families, as we are asking for adoption, and neighbors peep in and offer something to these seniors who most likely are suffering from those non-communicable diseases. Some are amputees. Some have got diabetes. Some have got kidney challenges. Some have got cancer. Some have had strokes. I mean, it's no easy matter when we can sit in our homes and we can eat and drink 3 times a day, and those persons out there who have helped to build Barbados with their blood, sweat, and tears in the sugar fields, in the shops, in the plantation houses, and so have nobody or anything that they can eat in these times. It says that if government cares about people and politics is about people, we will be justifying every rule in the book. And so our role here is to make sure that these $10 million will trickle down to the individuals. I am extremely proud today to know that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East has followed through with the policy this government has at this time when there is a curfew and people cannot get out, to be able to have their water connections reconnected. They would have been out of water for so long. So it is not just the People Empowerment Ministry that is doing this kind of social work to make sure that people are empowered, but there are synergies. The Ministry of Education, with these little children who are home now, the People Empowerment Ministry has to help to give them something. Those who are ill, those who are unemployed, we have to step up to the plate to make sure that they are all given the necessary assistance. When it comes to the community development officers and they're going out and finding people who are ill, they can't get their medication, pension is coming late, we need to be able to have one big family of over 280,000 people sharing and caring and working with others to help them to be able to at least rest comfortably with something in the stomach. And so these funds, sir, will help our persons to be able to go forward. I cannot close, sir, unless I indicate my gratitude and the gratitude of Barbados and the government of Barbados and the people of Barbados, where persons volunteered for more than a week to come to the People Empowerment Ministry to be able to help with the care packages, to make sure they had hand sanitizers and water, some Ensure, toilet tissue, some soap. It might not be the biggest package they could get, but at least it is a start that can last them for a week. And I am happy that volunteers came. But they're not the only volunteers. We've got the Salvation Army. I cannot name all, and I'm sure that I will be forgiven by those other agencies. We have the Vagrancy Group under Mr. Safri. We have the Hub with the Roman Catholic Church. We have the Seventh-day Adventists who do excellent work as well. They have all of the churches, the multi-faith institutions, I must tell you, the Muslims and so on. They are doing what they can do quietly. They're not going in front of every television set. They're not going in front of any photographer to go in the newspaper, but they do it because they care for their brother and sister whom they can see that deserve to get the meals, that deserve to get their medication, that deserve to be able to see and fulfill their doctor's appointments and so on. So I am very, very proud that Barbados is the Barbados that we always knew, coming together in this crisis to make sure that everybody, old, young, challenged, whatever the situation is with them, and able with my group to come and to be of assistance. Those who are going to the bank to put in some funding into that particular project that we are asking about to adopt the families. I want to thank all those who call to express themselves, those who offer their services to others to be able to bring an element of peace and comfort and gratification in the hearts of those who are less fortunate, because in every society you will find persons who are impoverished, and it is our duty, those who are better firm and standing on our feet, to be able to reach in and to be able to offer assistance. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wish to lend my wholehearted support to this exercise, and I want to thank those social workers and others who come on board willingly, working beyond human call, to be able to help us to achieve this goal of identifying those most vulnerable families and individuals in Barbados who at this time are disadvantaged in an even more serious way as a result of the COVID-19. And I want to encourage them, do not forget them despite We want to take our distance, and that is critical. And I encourage my senior citizens and others, stay away from others visiting unless they come to hand your package and leave again. We don't want them to be fraternizing with them and so on, because they are the most vulnerable. And I want, Mr. Speaker, to thank all persons, the honourable member and leader of the opposition and others who will continue to work with this government to be able to make a change that Barbadians and others can see. It is not COVID-19 that is going to pull us together. It is the natural way that Barbadians reach out and touch others that will change what we are seeing around, to be able to say we are one happy family, and we are going to fulfill our role by making sure that nobody else slips through the cracks by offering to them whatever is available to keep them stable and to make them feel they too are just as important as anybody else, because somebody is looking out for them and their welfare and that of their children and their seniors. So with those comments, sir, I wish to thank you sincerely for giving me the moment.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Yes, Mr. Chair, let me thank honourable members for their contributions, because at this critical time it's important that we continue to offer hope to the entire population. Just a bit of clarity, sir. The Household Survivor Program, sir, as I indicated earlier, will be supported ably by the Household Mitigation Unit, which is already established in the Prime Minister's office. And therefore, we'll be providing some administrative support to that program, and therefore persons whom believe that they fall into that category should provide information, support from the Household Mitigation Unit within the Prime Minister's office. The truth is, sir, as I said, April 1st is the extraordinary times that we're meeting on the first day of the financial year to do supplementaries. Certainly this was not contemplated as part of our process leading into this second year of the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, but we've had to make adjustments to the program, and certainly having met the target of 6% primary surplus at the end yesterday, which, yeah, despite having to make those extraordinary provisions with respect to the city member for the city of Bridgetown in terms of preparing the various pieces of infrastructure and the votes for critical healthcare equipment, that we still met the 6% primary surplus target. It demonstrates that clear leadership and vision, sir, can achieve anything. And I want to say to Barbadians that whilst we are in the midst of a clear global pandemic, that the government of Barbados is working with all of the partners to ensure that we can provide a measure of social cohesion for the country. All that is required is for every single Barbadian, sir, to do their part and be responsible for their own actions, because at the end of the day, sir, we are all in this together. And therefore, I want to urge all Barbadians to stay at home and only leave home only if they absolutely have to, sir, because it is critical that we first, as I said, contain the spread of COVID-19 so that we can continue the response in terms of responding to the persons who are certainly most vulnerable, and then thereafter, sir, as I said, be able to ramp up the domestic, not just agriculture production, but certainly the domestic stimulus that we hope will be in a position to shield much of Barbados until such time as the world economy can recover. And therefore, it is critical, sir, that all Barbadians who can hear me this morning, this afternoon, that they've listened and respond to the advice of the public health officials, because that is what is going to get us through this very early and important period with respect to the management of the pandemic. We are putting these monies here this morning to be able to respond to those most vulnerable persons in the community. We are making preparations, sir, to ensure that we anticipate if there are to be any disruptions to the international logistics supply chain, that the government will make the appropriate acquisitions to support the supply of food in this country, as well as keeping an eye on the hurricane season, which is going to be not too far away. And so, sir, with those few words, I beg to move that Head 35 stand part.
I beg to second it, sir. The question is, Head 35 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that you do no report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one money resolution in committee.
The question is that I do no report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one money resolution in the Standing Finance Committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one money resolution in Standing Finance Committee. Honourable member for Christchurch East Central.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read the first time.
The question is that the aforementioned resolution be read a first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned resolution be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution do no pass.
The question is that the aforementioned resolution be no passed. All those honourable members in favour, be agreed? Be agreed to. The question is the aforementioned resolution be agreed to. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we have come to the end of today's sitting. Mr. Speaker, speaking on adjournment, I would wish to adjourn the chamber on a date to be fixed. I think all members and certainly the entire country is well aware of the fluid nature of the situation that we are presently facing. We would have on the last occasion adjourned for a fixed date, and as you can tell, we had to return to be able to deal with a number of supplementaries and for the proclamation to be read before this House and certainly the other chamber. That said, sir, I suspect that we may have to return to the chamber in the course of the next few weeks, and I therefore would beg to move that this House be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
The question that this honourable chamber be adjourned for a date to be fixed. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.